Alright, shalom. Hebrews. Alright, minutes one Israelite asked me to go into the history of the Babylonian gods, Enki and Enlil. You know, I've been seeing a lot of Israelites gravitate towards that mess, and they don't even have no understanding what's going on, and that we worship the real Yah. You know, we worship the real Yah, and that how these Israelites want to get caught up being in these Babylonian gods. Man, that's not a good thing. And then the Israelites don't even understand that the people that we abandon our heritage to, the Sepharvaim who are from Cyprus, that they are responsible for the Babylonians' God's history. Now what they'll try to do is they'll try to get you off the real creator while they worship him, and then they'll have false gods for the other people to worship. You know, like being two-faced. Look, you see these gods are two-faced. Look, two-faced. Look, two faces. Two faces. He got a face in the front and a face in the back. You know, this one got a face on both sides. You know, they two-faced it, and that's where that term come from, because they'll try to worship the real God, but they'll slick have the false God for the other people to worship, to keep them in power. You know, it's your fault if you go worship them false gods. It's your fault if you go worship them false gods. But they two-faced it, and then they was only the rule for a little while, and then whatever rule that they get, it always come to an end. You know, that's like our father, Prophet Abraham, was told to leave the Mesopotamian area. That's where them gods was. That's where them gods, the Mesopotamian gods pantheon. You know, that's Enki Enlil. I don't even really like saying their name. Murdoch, Nabu. All those gods are from the Amorites, and that they founders and the people who brought them in existence are the people from Cyprus, the Amorites. Now the Amorites, you know, they try to say that the gods come from the Sumerian culture and that they come from the Akkadian culture. It don't matter, because Babel was before that, and that the Amorites, you know, that got a hold to the Nephilim culture, the Nephilim gods and so forth, and that they continued it even after the Nephilims were wiped out, because they were mixed in with them. You see, they was mixed in with the Nephilims. These folks right here, I'm going to show you. These folks right here. Them folks right there. They was mixed in with the Nephilims. I already showed in a few videos how the Nephilims were mixed in with the Amorites. And you can see that throughout Tanakh history. You know, the Tanakh history show you this. And those are the folks, the Canaanite tribes that we was told to destroy, the giants. Well, they was mixed in with the Amorites. You know, the Amorites and them, you know, they was mixed up, and they kind of like the Sepharvaim are the continuation of the Nephilims. You know what I'm saying? I got a video explaining this. But a lot of Israelites are starting to fall for their gods. Now, their gods were created on the Euphrates. Look, you see where Cyprus is? Look, you see Cyprus right there. Cyprus is on the Euphrates. Now, check this out. Alright, we're going to go here, and then they'll explain it themselves. Look, Enki and Enlil are two important deities in Mesopotamian mythology, particularly in the religious belief of the Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians. They were central figures in the pantheon gods played significant roles in the creation and governance of their world. Alright, look, you see, Enki are two ancient Mesopotamian gods. They had complex relationship with each other, and alright, look, with each other and with the rest of the pantheon. You know what I'm saying? That's Nabu, Murdoch, and all them other gods. They were sometimes in conflict, and their interaction reflected different aspects of divine authority and power. Despite their differences, both deities were essentially to the functioning of the cosmos and understood by the ancient Mesopotamians. The ancient Mesopotamians. Look, later, Enki, later known as E by the Akkadians and Babylonians, was the Sumerian deity of wisdom, intelligence, tricks. Look, tricks and magic. Now, we was told to stay away from magic. We can see that in the Tanakh real easily. Sorcery, magic, and all that stuff. Almighty Yah told us to stay away from that type of stuff, And look, fresh water, the healing, creation, fertility. Originally, he was worshipped as the pantheon of Eridu, which the Sumerians considered to be the first city created when the world began. But we know Babel is going to be it. Look, which means confusion. Look, all right, according to myth, Enki gave birth to the Tigris and Euphrates. Look, Euphrates rivers from the streams of water flowing off his body. And look, that's where the Sepharvaim's from. That's where the Sepharvaim's from. And the Sepharvaim's was placed in our land in 722 BC. They're from ancient Cyprus. Now, they've been responsible for the gods, keeping them fake gods' history alive. And they have a whole lot of cuneiform texts that they responsible for cuneiform writing. And they kept their gods' history alive from ancient times to now. And Israelites are being tricked into believing in that mess. We got to be careful, man, and that we can't believe in nothing but what our father Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob believed in. And they believed in one Yah. But look here, this is when them folks was placed in our land. And then when we abandoned our heritage, man, it put them men in control, men of the Israelite heritage. And then, we know Judaism, Christianity, and Islam come off our broken covenant, and those are the main dominant religions in Western culture. And that those folks outside of that, man, they been keeping the Babylonian gods history straight. And they starting to get people, the Israelites, to fall into that trap because they know that we waking up. It's like a last ditch effort. Look, and the king of Assyria brought men from Babylon and from Cuddar and from Abel and from Hamath and from Sepharvaim. Sepharvaim is ancient Cyprus, and placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the children of Israel. You see, so those folks right there, the Sepharvaims are responsible for these fake gods right here. They fake gods and so forth. Them gonna probably be some Amorites, but look, they're two-faced. And they tell lies and so forth. And that, people believed in that mess when Babel was confounded and stuff, and that they went and created other religions and so forth. We know that Nod was around, that Cain went to, and that's where the serpent and the Nephilims hung out with. Well, it's possible that the serpents and the Nephilims are slick the Babylonians' gods in pantheon and their mythology and so forth, because we know that confusion, once Almighty Yah confounded the languages because they was trying to get up in the heavens. But we know that the Nephilims are off what they call the fallen angelic beings that mix with the humans. So we know that they tried to get back up in the heaven, as what, the Tanakh show. But look here, Babel. And let's look and see what Babel means. Confusion, confused noise made by numerous voices. So that's what you get now. It is the confusion coming from them folks. Now look here, and then look at Babel. And it's supposed to be the first spot, and that the Nephilim's seed gonna try to get back up into the heavens and so forth. And then Almighty Yah confounded them. Look. And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it come to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they founded a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, Go and let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And they said, Go to and let us build us a city and a tower whose top may reach into heaven. And let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. And the Elohim came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men had built. And that's going to be the Nephilim's children, the fallen angelic beings' children, the Mesopotamian gods, pantheon, Enki and Enlil and all them. Those going to be the Nephilim's direct children. Look. And the Elohim said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they began to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. And now we know that they was doing nothing but wickedness on the earth, man, at one time. So Almighty Yah confounded them and broke them up. See, that's going to go back, man, to this right here. And it come to pass when men began to multiply, this is Genesis 6, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of Yah saw the daughters of men, But let's get to the men Tanakh and get a little better understanding, man, of this. Let's get in the Tanakh, man, and get a little better understanding of this, because you have to be careful with that King James version. Look. Alright, this is Genesis 6 after tonight. When men began to increase on the earth, and daughters was born to them, the divine beings saw how beautiful the daughters of men were, and took wives from among those that pleased them. The Elohim said, My breath shall not abide in man forever, since he is to his flesh. Let the days be allowed him to be 120 years. It was then and later too that the Nephilim appeared on earth, when the divine beings cohabitated with the daughters of men, who bore them offsprings. They were the heroes of old and the men of renown. Look, and the Elohim saw how great men wickedness on earth, and how every plan devised by his mind was nothing but evil all the time. So then that's going to be these folks right here. That's going to be them. That's going to be them right there. That's going to be them. See, they think they slick. See, the Sepharvaim think they slick, and they'll get you to worship the Nephilims on the slick. They'll get you to worship the Nephilims on the slick. You got to be careful what you believe in. See, Israelites will go for anything, especially if they don't know Tanakh history or know that we Israelites. Man, they'll easily fall into this trap. And then that's what's happening to the Israelites now. Them two-faced peoples, because they had to be two-faced the Almighty Yah to go cohabitate with creation and then have children that was wicked and that was soldiers, soldiers and killers and everything. Those gonna be the people with great respect, and that they were called the giants and stuff. Well, their descendants and who did they eventually mixed up with is gonna be the Amorites. The Amorites, and those are the peoples we were supposed to destroy. We were supposed to destroy in Tanakh history. Man, the Tanakh is full of the giants. It's full of the giants, But man, if you go to Joshua or Numbers, I think it's 13:33, Joshua 13, chapter 13, 12, Deuteronomy 3:11. Man, I got plenty verses showing you how the Amorites mixed in with those Nephilims. And then the Amorites are the Sepharvaims from Sippar, who said that the Babylonian gods started the Euphrates, and the Euphrates River. And then you see that's where they at, ancient Sippar. They're on the Euphrates. They're Amorites. And they are the offspring of these folks too. The fallen angelic beings, the giants who mixed in, the divine beings who mixed in with the with men's children, daughters and so forth, man, and gave birth to them. That's why they was two-faced, because they gonna be two-faced. They gonna know the truth, but they gonna teach a lie. They gonna teach a lie so you can worship them. And then that's where, the Amorites do. That's what the Sephardists do with their way. They'll worship Almighty Yah, but they'll get you to worship the Babylonian gods and so forth that they created and that they got control of, you see. So you got to be careful not to get caught up in that mess. Look, see, and Prophet Abraham, our father, had strength enough to leave the area where they were and had control. Look, you see down there. That's what our father Abraham was. He was in ancient and then he left there and went to Canaan, to what those folks seed that mixed in with the Amorite was, the giants, and then we was to destroy them, but we didn't. And then they stayed in our heritage and got our heritage when we did a stupid move to go off into Egypt to worship the Egyptian religion. And then it put them in control to lead, man, to have Western culture, still alive, But let me see if I could, send God, synagogue, first in New York. Them folks come here and then they set up shop in what's called New York. Gonna be the first synagogue, the oldest synagogue, and then that they would, start Western culture. Western culture is directly off the Babylonian culture. I didn't explain that the streets, the judges, the whole administrative structure is identical to what was in Sippar, what was in ancient Sippar there. So, it's quite natural that they gonna get, Israelites to, to worship their gods and believe in their gods and so forth to kind of keep us off track, because it's important with their rule is if they get the Israelites to fall for false gods and stuff. So, the fallen angelic beings, who the Israelites worship now, Enki Enlil are the Nephilim's descendants. These are their direct descendants and so forth. And these are the ones that wanted to build Babel and reach into the heavens, because if the divine beings are trapped here on earth, then it's going to be quite natural is that they see want to get into the heavens and so forth. And then that's what you see with the space agencies and so forth right now. Them going back off into the heavens and so forth. And then that's going to be their descendants, they seed and so forth. And then they try to get the Israelites, men, to believe in that mess. You know, it's easy not to believe in it because all you got to do is trust in the Yah of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You know, Prophet Abraham was told to leave these parts, you know, to get away from these parts, and that his father and them and some of them folks worship, you know what I'm saying, them fake gods. But how Prophet Abraham had the courage and the understanding to leave, and that these fake gods, Enki and Enlil and all them Babylonian deities and stuff, were the felon angelic beings' children. Look, now the Elohim has said unto Abraham, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show thee, and I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. Because we were supposed to destroy. The blessing is that if we Israelites would have followed what Almighty Yah said and destroyed them Canaanite tribes, we would have been destroying the root to these false gods worship. You know, that's what we'd have been doing. We would have been destroying the root to these false gods worship. See, they don't want us to know this, and they want us to be lost, especially since we've been in captivity, and they so-called brainwashed us and then installed their false values in us Israelites, is that you don't supposed to never come up out of the falseness that they created, and you supposed to always be stuck. And then they throw these fake gods, man, before you, and then you supposed to latch on to it, and then you supposed to, you know, be stuck there, and then they keep the folks that we abandoned our heritage to with the power. You see what I'm saying? It's just, they trying everything in their last days to stay in power. And one of the ways that they gonna stay in power is if they get the Israelites to start worshiping false gods and so forth. You know, so it's easy to trick an Israelite and have him worshiping anything. You know, and the Israelites are the people from the transatlantic slave trade that was captured in Africa. And we went into Africa after we broke the covenant in the book of Jeremiah, and we ran off to do African Egyptian religion, which caused our enslavement. And then it was those folks right there that specifically come and got us out of Africa, and then brought us to the Americas, that they created Western culture, and that they stripped us of everything, and then that's to put them false gods and so forth on us. You know, that's their job. That's their job, and that's what they gonna do. It's up to you to be smart enough to resist that mess, you know. And then all the Babylonian gods are false, and they're the Nephilim's children, and that Almighty Yah got power over them. See, did none of these false gods, did none of these false gods gonna tell the Israelites that they would be in captivity and under control, and that, you know, that we was the priestly nation that Almighty Yah chose on this earth, and that how he didn't choose these fake gods to lead in anything. He didn't choose the Nephilims to lead in anything. And the Nephilims gonna be the Amorites forefathers, the giants, Og and Sihon, and all those individuals in Tanakh history that we didn't destroy when we come out of Egypt. These are their fathers and so forth, and these are their leaders, and they worship these fake gods and so forth. So, you know, an Israelite got to stay away from that mess. You know, in the Tanakh, the giants, you know, could be easily traced to man, into them Amorites. You know, I got a video showing this, man. If you look through any of the history that I show, that you gonna see, man, that, you know, I'm showing, you know, that the Amorites are the Nephilim's descendants. You know, they're the Nephilim's descendants and so forth. So, you know, if you go off and worship that mess, man, know for sure that, you know, that you're doing something that our forefathers was told not to do. You know, look. See, this is Deuteronomy 3. For only Og, king of Bashan, remain of the giants. But in the Tanakh, the giants gonna be translated as Nephilims. You see what I'm saying? They are Nephilims and so forth. And man, I got a lot of verses, man, showing how that, you know, that the Nephilims are the peoples that we were supposed to destroy when we left Egypt, coming into the land of Canaan, and that the land of Canaan were controlled by the Amorites, who are these folks mixed with. You see what I'm saying? And that'd be the giants, the Nephilims in Tanakh history, and that they mix with them folks, and then that they resided on Sippar. Sippar was like the headquarters, and those are the Babylonian scribes that got in our heritage placed there in 722 BCE by the king of Assyria, who also worshiped them false gods and so forth. And then when we abandoned heritage, men, they left the door open for them to come back with this later on, after they done took the Israelite heritage over and then tricked the folks into believing in that they the continuation of the Israelites. Then it's easy for them to come back and create these false gods on the back end, because that's why they're two-faced. You see what I'm saying? That's why they two-faced, you know, and that they not gonna, you know, do right by the Creator and so forth. And that's why they was just given a little time to rule until we wake up and realize what's going on. So, you know, an Israelite shouldn't be believing in none of the Mesopotamian gods. You know, we shouldn't believe in none of them. And they gonna trick the Israelites to try to get us to believe in them, because that's their job. That's what they do. They are two-faced, and that they create confusion. And that's what Babel means. And that's where they was. You know, after Almighty Yah confounded the language. But at first they was trying to get back up into the heavens, because they are descendants of the divine beings that made it with the creation. And you know, that's these folks right here. Them folks right there. So, you know, it's important, you know, that you don't get caught up in that mess. It's easy to get caught up in that mess. You know, Israelites shouldn't get caught up in no worship. No worship, look. Alright. Israelites should stay away from the Mesopotamian gods, pantheon, the Sepharvaim, or Amorites, and they founded ancient Sippar on the Euphrates, and they founded Western culture that we are captive in. Their job is to push their gods to keep them alive. You see, why they pushing them gods and you believe in it, then you going into another captivity. You going into a spiritual captivity as well as a mental captivity. So, you know, if you want to, you know, stay in captivity, all you got to do is believe in them folks' gods. You know, believe in them folks' gods. Almighty Yah gave us something simple to do. And that's just to worship Him and Him only. You know, the Yah that Abraham worshiped. Abraham didn't worship Enki. Now what they'll try to do is, they'll try to convince you that Enki and Enlil and them Babylonian gods are responsible for creation. But that's a lie. That's a lie, because I just showed you how Almighty Yah already had creation already. Now them Nephilims gonna be descended and gonna be mixed in with this cat right here. With this cat right here. So if you worship If you worship the Babylonians, mythology and pantheon and their gods, this is who you slick worship. Now the serpent was more suitable than any beast of the field which the Elohim Yah had made. You see what I'm saying? You're going to be following in his footsteps. So you got to be careful. You don't want to be worshiping these gods right here. Those are the Nephilim's children. Shalom. Message from the Israelite Brotherhood.